Hello.
My stepson mocked me in front of the whole family the day before our vacation, and my wife stayed silent. I changed the tickets and paid for just one. Their reaction was loud. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. My name is Robert. I'm 46 years old, living in Denver, working as an engineer. I don't pretend my life has been easy, but I built something steady, something real. From my first marriage, I have two children, Sophie, 13, and Jake, 11. Their mother and I divorced, but we never let bitterness poison the children. We co-parent well, and those kids have always shown me something simple but rare: respect. They look me in the eye when I speak. They know the meaning of gratitude. Even in their rebellion, they never forget who I am to them. 3 years ago, I remarried. Lisa entered my life, and with her came Ethan. 17 now, loud in his laughter, louder in his silences. His father, Mike, has always been the ghost in the room. He shows up on birthdays with expensive sneakers, maybe posts a filtered picture on Instagram, playing the role of the fun dad. But when Ethan needed braces, when his grades slipped, when he sprained his ankle at football practice, Mike was never there. That's been me. Doctor visits, tuition payments, late-night drives to practices and games, new tires for his car, even filling out his FAFSA when Lisa couldn't figure out the forms. I never tried to erase his father or steal a title I hadn't earned. I just wanted Ethan to have someone steady, someone he could count on when the lights went out and the world got ugly. For years, I convinced myself it was working. He didn't call me Dad, but he leaned on me when things fell apart. I thought maybe that's enough. Maybe presence can speak louder than blood. The day before we were supposed to leave for a family vacation in California, I cooked dinner. The house smelled of garlic and seared chicken, the kind of meal I hoped might bring us together before the long drive. The table was set neatly. For plates, glasses lined up straight, napkins folded just right. My kids sat beside me, Lisa across, Ethan next to her. For a moment, I allowed myself the lie that this was a picture of family. A snapsh asterisk T worth remembering. But pictures lie. Halfway through the meal, Ethan smirked. He leaned back in his chair, fork dangling in his hand. His voice sliced across the table. "You're not family. You're just Mom's new husband." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even said with anger. No, it was worse than that. He said it casually, like a fact, like a truth so obvious it didn't even deserve discussion. And then he laughed. Lisa chuckled with him. A quick, nervous sound that cut me deeper than his words. Sophie and Jake froze. Their forks hovered midair, their eyes wide, their small bodies tight with shock. They looked at me like they just watched someone spit in my face. But Lisa stayed silent. She didn't defend me. She didn't rebuke him. She didn't even look at me. She let the words hang in the air like smoke, choking me while she swallowed her food. I stared at Ethan. His smirk only widened, as if daring me to challenge him, daring me to claim a place he had already stripped from me. He had turned a family dinner into a verdict, and his mother had been the judge who refused to intervene. The laugh echoed in my head. Casual, cruel sound. My own wife's voice, joining her son's, drawing a line in the sand. And my kids, staring, wordless, caught between their respect for me and the ugly truth they just witnessed. Something broke inside me. Not a crack. A snap. Clean, final. I kept eating, though I couldn't taste a thing. I forced the food down because if I didn't, I might have stood up and walked out right then. My hands shook as I gripped the fork, my knuckles white. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, proud of himself. He thought he'd won something. He thought words were cheap. He had no idea how expensive they would become. That night, I lay in bed beside Lisa. She scrolled on her phone, giggling at something online, as if the evening hadn't left scorch marks across my chest. I stared at the ceiling in silence, listening to her breathe, waiting for an apology that never came. She didn't mention Ethan's words. She didn't even glance at me. Her silence was its own betrayal, louder than anything he had said. In the dark, I replayed it over and over. "You're not family. You're just mom's new husband. Each repetition dug deeper. Not family. Just a placeholder. Just a wallet. Just a man who had spent years carrying weight that was never his, only to be told he had no claim to the people he carried it for. I thought of every late night spent in the garage fixing Ethan's car, every bill I'd paid without complaint, every time I'd sat on cold bleachers to watch him play sports while his real father was nowhere to be seen. I thought of the Christmases I had funded, the vacations I had planned, the hours of my life I had given away to make his path easier. And for what? A smirk, a sentence, a mother's silence. When you've sacrificed without recognition, there's always a moment when the dam breaks. For me, that night was it. I turned on the bedside lamp. Lisa looked at me, startled, her phone's glow still shining on her face. "What's wrong?" she asked, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't laughed along with her son. "Nothing," I said, but it wasn't nothing. It was everything. I got out of bed, walked to my office, and sat in front of my computer. The room was dim, the hum of the machine the only sound. My reflection in the dark screen looked like a stranger, hollow eyes, clenched jaw, a man whose patience had finally rotted away. The vacation itinerary was still open in my email. For tickets to California, hotel reservations, rental car. I stared at them for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keys. And then I acted. The glow of the computer screen lit up my office that night, washing my face in cold, sterile light. My email stared back at me. 4 tickets to California, booked weeks ago. A hotel reservation with ocean views. A rental car waiting at the airport. The promise of a week I had worked overtime to afford. A week I told myself would prove we were a real family. And then Ethan's words replayed in my head, sharp and casual. "You're not family. You're just mom's new husband." I hovered over the keyboard. My fingers trembled, but not from hesitation. The kind of trembling that comes when you've been holding back too long and finally decide to let go. I canceled 3 of the 4 tickets. My children, Sophie and Jake, deserved a vacation, but this wasn't the time to reward innocence. They had already seen enough. Instead, I canceled everything but one, mine. I made sure the refund went directly back to my account. Not into Lisa's, not into the joint account we shared, but mine. The hotel reservation? Cancelled. The rental car? Gone. Then I opened a new document. I listed every monthly expense I had been carrying for Ethan. His car insurance, $187 a month. His cell phone plan, $90. His streaming subscriptions, $40. His school lunch account, his sports fees, his gas card, his college application payments. Line by line, I wrote them down. The total stared at me like a cruel joke. Over $700 a month. $700 to sustain a boy who laughed at me, a wife who stayed silent, and a father who reappeared only when it was convenient. I drafted an email to Mike, the ghost. It was short, sharp, and merciless. Attached is a list of Ethan's monthly expenses. These are now your responsibility. Robert. I hit send. There was no satisfaction in it. No gloating. Only clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally accept what you are and what you are not. I wasn't Ethan's family. I wasn't his father. I wasn't even worth defending in my own home. Fine. Then I wouldn't play the role anymore. When I shut off the computer, the house was silent. Lisa slept in our bed upstairs, dreaming in the safety I had built for her and her son. Ethan snored down the hall, dreaming in the comfort my money provided. My kids, Sophie and Jake, lay in their rooms, probably still replaying the dinner scene, trying to understand how their stepbrother could be so cruel, how their stepmother could be so complicit. I poured a glass of bourbon and sat by the window. Outside, the Denver streets were quiet, lined with shadows. I sipped the drink and let the fire spread through my chest. Something inside me hardened. In the morning, everything would change. Breakfast was chaos before it even began. Lisa sat at the counter, coffee steaming in her mug, scrolling on her phone. Sophie and Jake got themselves cereal. Ethan stumbled into the kitchen late, hair messy, phone in hand, smirking as if the night before hadn't happened. I placed an envelope on the counter. Inside was the list of Ethan's expenses, neatly typed, each line item in bold. At the bottom I had written, "Transferred to Mike effective immediately." "What's this?" Lisa asked, picking it up. Her voice was casual at first, but when her eyes scanned the page, it cracked. "Robert, what is this?" "It's a bill," I said calmly. "The one I've been paying for 6 years. I forwarded it to Mike. It's his now." Her face tightened. "You can't just." "I can." And I did. Ethan grabbed the paper out of her hand, skimmed it, then let out a scoff. "This is a joke, right? You're not actually cutting me off." I met his eyes. "You said I wasn't family. You were right. Families don't pay each other's bills when there's no respect. Call your father." The smirk vanished. His face flushed red, his voice cracked. "This is humiliating. You're trying to make me beg him for money?" I didn't flinch. Not trying. Succeeding. Lisa slammed her mug down, coffee spilling across the counter. "Robert, this is extreme. He's just a teenager. He didn't mean it." I cut her off with a glare. "He meant it. And you laughed." Silence. For a moment, the kitchen felt like a courtroom. Every eye on me, waiting for the verdict. My kids, Sophie and Jake, sat still, quiet, watching. They didn't laugh, didn't roll their eyes, didn't defend Ethan. They only looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Approval. By noon, the fallout began. Ethan stormed through the house, slamming doors, shouting that I had ruined his life. He called Mike, but I heard the conversation from the other room. Short, clipped, ending with Ethan yelling, "That's not fair," before hanging up. Lisa cornered me in the living room, her voice sharp with rage. "Do you realize what you've done? You canceled the vacation. You've humiliated Ethan. You've dumped everything on Mike. Everything I carried alone for 6 years," I said flatly. "He can't afford all that." She *T back. "Strange," I said, my tone like ice. "I managed it just fine." Her mouth opened, but no words came. That evening, Mike called me. His voice was tight, almost trembling with anger. "What the hell is this, Robert? You expect me to cover all this? Car insurance, phone bills, sports fees? I can't afford that." I leaned back in my chair, calm. "Then maybe you shouldn't have had a son if you weren't ready to raise him. You can't just dump this on me." He shouted. "I can," I said. "And I did. 6 years, Mike. 6 years I carried your weight while you played the fun dad on Instagram. Now it's yours again. Congratulations." He cursed at me before hanging up. I stared at the phone for a long time afterward. I felt no guilt, only clarity. The backlash inside the house grew louder each day. Ethan shouted that I was cruel. Lisa insisted I was destroying the family, and Mike kept sending bitter texts demanding I reconsider. But for the first time in years, I didn't bend. Sophie and Jake stayed quiet, but I could see it in their eyes. Pride. For the first time, they saw their father not just as the man who provided, but the man who refused to be used. And maybe that was worth everything. The first few days after I cut Ethan off were filled with noise. Slammed doors, raised voices, bitter accusations thrown like stones across the living room. But then the noise faded, and what replaced it was far more revealing. Silence. Not the peace of a calm home, but the silence of helplessness, of a boy suddenly realizing the foundation beneath him had crumbled. Ethan's car sat in the driveway like a stranded animal, dust gathering on the hood. The insurance had lapsed, and the registration notice arrived in the mail, bright red letters screaming what I already knew. Without me, the vehicle was nothing more than an expensive paperweight. I watched from the kitchen window as Ethan paced around it one afternoon, keys in hand, muttering curses under his breath. He tried starting it anyway, hoping defiance could fuel the tank. The engine coughed and sputtered, but without coverage, it might as well have been chained. The next casualty was his phone. Service shut off without payment. The boy who once spent hours scrolling Instagram, snapping photos, and blasting music now walked around the house like a ghost, clutching a dead device as if willing it back to life. The silence from his friends cut deeper than anything I could have said. His lifeline to the world had been severed. Streaming accounts went dark. His Xbox subscription failed. Even his school lunch card bounced, the cafeteria staff telling him, in front of his peers, that there were no funds available. That humiliation followed him home, written across his face, though he tried to mask it with anger. Lisa confronted me again, her voice brittle with desperation. Robert, he's suffering. He can't even eat at school without borrowing money from friends. This is too much. You've made your point. I looked her in the eye, my tone steady. No, Lisa. He's only just beginning to understand my point. Words have weight. Choices have consequences. For once, he's living in the world he created. She flinched at that, but she didn't argue further. Perhaps because deep down, she knew I was right. The first real crack in Ethan came one evening when he sat at the kitchen table with a notebook open. He wasn't studying. He wasn't doing homework. He was scribbling numbers, erasing them, scribbling again. Bills, expenses, trying to piece together the arithmetic of independence. His lips moved as he muttered to himself, adding, subtracting, cursing under his breath. Finally, he slammed the pen down and stared at me across the table. His bravado was gone, replaced by something rawer, frustration mixed with fear. "How did you do it?" he asked quietly. "Do what?" I replied, not lifting my eyes from the paper I was reading. "Pay for all this. For years. The car, the phone, the school stuff. All of it." His voice cracked, betraying the boy beneath the swagger. I folded the paper and set it aside. "By working. By sacrificing. By putting your needs ahead of mine. Things your real father never did." He swallowed hard. His jaw tightened, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Later that night, I forwarded him a text I had received from Mike. "How on earth did you cover all these expenses for so long? I can barely handle his phone bill." I wanted Ethan to see it, to feel it, to finally confront the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. I watched him read the message. His hands trembled slightly as he held the phone. His face shifted from confusion to anger to something else entirely. Realization. For the first time, he saw who had truly been carrying him. For the first time, he understood that Mike wasn't just unreliable, he was incapable. He didn't say anything at first. He simply sat there, staring at the screen, as if it had rewritten the last 6 years of his life in an instant. Then he spoke, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "I messed up," he whispered. "I said things I shouldn't have. You've done more for me than my dad ever has." I didn't respond right away. I wanted the silence to stretch, to weigh heavy on him. Finally, I said, "Words are cheap, Ethan. It's your actions that tell me who you are." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening though he tried to hide it. Then he left the table without another word. The days that followed were strange. Ethan's arrogance had cracked, but it hadn't disappeared entirely. He wasn't used to apologizing, wasn't used to carrying weight. Still, small changes began to show. He started doing small chores without being asked. Taking out the trash, loading the dishwasher, fixing himself simple meals when before he would have demanded someone else do it. They weren't grand gestures, but they were cracks in the armor, signs of a boy trying to reconcile his pride with his guilt. One night, he came to me while I was working in the garage. His voice was quiet, uncertain. "I'm sorry," he said. This time, there was no smirk, no sarcasm, just raw honesty. "I didn't mean what I said at dinner. I was angry, stupid. You've been there for me more than my dad ever has. And I don't know why I treated you like that." I set the wrench down and looked at him. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes downcast. For once, he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to be heard. "I hear your words," I said. "But respect isn't in words, Ethan. It's in the way you live. You'll have to show me." He nodded again, quietly. "I will." For the first time, I believed him, at least a little. But apologies, even sincere ones, don't erase damage. They don't rebuild trust overnight. Lisa hoped the moment would be enough, that I would melt, that everything would return to the way it had been before. She didn't understand that things could never go back. The line had been crossed. The mask had been torn away. Ethan's wake-up call had come, but now the real test would begin. Would he act differently, or would he slip back into the comfort of contempt the moment I let my guard down? I knew the answer would reveal itself soon enough. Weeks passed. The house grew quieter, not because the tension had vanished, but because everyone was learning to walk carefully in its shadow. Ethan had changed. Not completely, not miraculously, but enough that even Lisa noticed. He no longer asked for money. He no longer assumed his car would be fixed or his bills would be paid by some invisible hand. He began taking small jobs, mowing lawns in the neighborhood, helping a friend's father move boxes, even bagging groceries part-time at the local store. I watched from a distance. It wasn't pride I felt. It wasn't even relief. It was something colder, something sharper, vindication. He was finally tasting the life I had shielded him from for years. The weight of bills, the bitterness of responsibility, the silence of a father who couldn't or wouldn't step up. Lisa tried to bridge the gap, but her efforts rang hollow. She asked me one evening, while we sat in the living room, "Do you think you've proven your point?" I looked at her steady. It's not about proving a point. It's about living with truth. For years I was paying to be ignored, paying to be disrespected. That's over. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Maybe because she knew I wasn't wrong. Maybe because deep down, she had grown tired of making excuses for a boy who never faced consequences. The turning point came quietly, almost without ceremony. Ethan had a girlfriend, Amanda, a sweet girl with kind eyes who seemed to steady him more than his mother or father ever had. One evening, she invited him to dinner at her parents' house, and he asked if Lisa and I would join. We drove over together, the air thick with unspoken questions. When we arrived, Amanda's parents greeted us warmly, ushering us inside. Halfway through dinner, Amanda's father turned to Ethan and asked, "So who's this with you?" And Ethan answered without hesitation, "This is my dad, not stepdad, not mom's husband, Dad." The word hung in the air like a flare in the night sky. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't even acknowledge it. I simply sat there, staring at my plate, letting the word echo in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was something undeniable. Recognition. The kind I had waited years to hear. Later that night, when we got home, Ethan approached me in the garage while I was putting away tools. He shifted awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes on the ground. "I meant it," he said softly. "At dinner. You've been more of a dad to me than mine ever was. I was too stubborn to admit it." I studied him. His words were different now. No smirk, no sarcasm, no performance. Just truth. "I didn't do it for titles," I said. "I did it because someone had to. But don't think one word erases years. Respect isn't something you sprinkle in when it suits you. It's something you live every day." He nodded. "I know, and I'll try." That was all. No dramatic embrace, no tears. Just an exchange of words that carried more weight than any gift, any payment, any vacation ever could. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's actions began to speak. He kept his part-time job. He managed his expenses even when it meant sacrifice. When his phone broke, he saved up and bought a used one instead of coming to me with outstretched hands. When his car needed repairs, he asked if I could show him how to fix it rather than asking me to pay for it. Slowly, he was learning. Mike, on the other hand, faded even further. The man who had once stormed into my life with angry phone calls now went silent. He sent Ethan the occasional text, vague promises, half-hearted apologies, but no money, no real help. Ethan stopped defending him. The pedestal crumbled, and in its place came a hollow understanding. His real father had abandoned him long before I ever arrived. One night, Ethan and I were in the driveway, replacing his car battery. He held the flashlight while I tightened the bolts. The air was cool, the smell of engine grease thick in the air. Why did you do it? He asked suddenly. Do what? All of it. Pay for everything. Stick around. Take care of me when you didn't have to. I paused, looked at him, and then went back to my work. Because someone had to. Because your mom deserved help. Because kids don't ask to be born, and they shouldn't suffer because their father is weak. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I get it now. I didn't before. But I do now. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. Months later, when Ethan graduated high school, he walked across the stage in his cap and gown. Lisa cried beside me, clapping wildly. Sophie and Jake cheered. When Ethan reached us afterward, he hugged his mother first, then turned to me. For the first time, he embraced me fully, no hesitation. His voice cracked as he whispered, Thank you, Dad. I held him for a moment, but I didn't let my guard drop. Because I knew gratitude in the glow of graduation wasn't the real test. The test would be in the years to come, in the choices he made, in the way he carried himself. Looking back, I realized something I wish I had known years earlier. Respect cannot be bought, cannot be begged for. It cannot be bribed with vacations, cars, or tuition payments. Respect is born when boundaries are enforced, when lines are drawn, when consequences match actions. I don't regret cutting Ethan off. In fact, it was the kindest thing I ever did for him. I forced him to see the truth, that his real father was nothing more than a ghost, and that the man he dismissed had been his anchor all along. I no longer wait for gratitude. I no longer expect applause. I live with boundaries. I live with consistency. And in doing so, I've ensured that the people who truly matter, Sophie, Jake, and yes, even Ethan, will never again mistake who I am. So now I ask you, would you have done the same? Or would you have endured the insult, paid the bills, and swallowed the disrespect until nothing was left of you? Because I know my answer, and I can live with it.
Bye bye.